Good evening and welcome to Sun Middle Temple. We're so happy you've joined us. My name is Alba and I use she, her pronouns. This is our 2nd November observance, and I'm so happy you are here. As always, this service is recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. Please remember our What We've Accomplished survey. We're asking people to contribute their favorite thing we've done and be on the lookout for our upcoming newsletter, which has our very important end of the year survey. We'll begin today with our opening words, which will appear on the slide behind you. Feel free to listen as I read the words aloud or read aloud at home. We welcome you into the light of the gods and light this flame in celebration. May its brightness symbolize our connection to the gods in the natural world. May you join us in this community of faith, cherishing love and with open hearts. So our theme for this month is continuing on the dangers of ignorance, and our readings today are on Civil Disobedience by Henry David Thoreau, The Poetic Edda, translated by Henry A. Bellows, and The Allegory of the Cave from Book 7 of Plato's Republic, translated by Benjamin Jowett. We will begin with On Civil Disobedience, and please note I have edited this version of the text down to be shorter, simply because it was quite long. Although I do highly recommend you go and read the whole full version, and if you would like a copy, please let me know and I am happy to link you to the one I used. It is not a man's duty, as a matter of course, to devote himself to the eradication of any, even the most enormous wrong. He may still properly have other concerns to engage him, but it is his duty, at least, to wash his hands of it, and, if he gives it no thought longer, not to give it practically his support. If I devote myself to other pursuits and contemplations, I must first see at least that I do not pursue them sitting upon another man's shoulders. I must get off him first, that he may pursue his contemplations too. See what gross inconsistency is tolerated. I have heard some of my townsmen say, I should like to have them order me out to help put down an insurrection of slaves, or to go to march to Mexico, see if I would go. And yet these very men have each, directly by their allegiance, and so indirectly at least by their money, furnished a substitute. The soldier is applauded who refuses to serve in an unjust war by those who do not refuse to sustain the unjust government which makes the war. He is applauded by those whose own act and authority he disregards and sets at naught, as if the state were penitent to that degree that it hired one to scourge it while it shined, but not to the degree that it left off sinning for a moment. Thus, under the name of order and civil government, we are all made to pay homage to and support our own meanness. After the first blush of sin comes its indifference, and from immoral it becomes, as it were, unmoral, and not quite unnecessary to that life which we have made. When I converse with the freest of my neighbors, I perceive that whatever they may say about the magnitude and seriousness of the question, and the regard for public tranquillity, the long and short of the matter is that they cannot spare the protection of the existing government, and they dread the consequences of disobedience to it, to their property and families. For my own part, I should not like to think that I ever rely on the protection of the state, but if I deny the authority of the state when it presents its tax bill, it will soon take and waste all my property, and so harass me and my children without end. This is hard. This makes it impossible for a man to live honestly, and at the same time comfortably in outward respects. I think sometimes, why, this people mean well, they are only ignorant. They would do better if they knew how. Why give your neighbors this pain to treat you as they are not inclined to? But I think again, this is no reason why I should do as they do, or permit others to suffer a much greater pain of a different kind. Again, I sometimes say to myself, when many millions of men, without heat, without ill will, without personal feeling of any kind, demand of you a few shillings only, without the possibility, such is their constitution, of retracting or altering their present demand, and without the possibility, on your side, of appeal to any other millions, why expose yourself to this overwhelming brute force? You do not resist cold and hunger, the winds and the waves, thus obstinately. You quietly submit to 1,000 similar necessities. You do not put your head into the fire. But just in proportion as I regard this as not wholly a brute force, but partly a human force, and consider that I have relations to those millions as to so many millions of men, and not of mere brute nor inanimate things, I see that appeal is possible. First and instantaneously from them and to the maker of them, and secondly, from them to themselves. But if I put my head deliberately into the fire, there is no appeal to fire or to the maker of fire, and I have only myself to blame. If I could convince myself that I have any right to be satisfied with men as they are, and to treat them accordingly, and not according, in some respects, to my requisitions and expectations of what they and I ought to be, then, like a good Mussulman and fatalist, I should endeavor to be satisfied with things as they are, and say it is the will of God. And above all, there is this difference between resisting this and a purely brute or natural force, that I can resist this with some effect, but I cannot expect, like Orpheus, to change the nature of the rocks and trees and beasts. Okay. Then our next reading is the Poetic Edda. This is the Havamal section, translated by Henry A. Bellows. A man shall not boast of his keenness of mind, but keep it close in his breast. To the silent and wise does ill seldom come, when he goes as a guest to a house, for faster a friend one never finds than wisdom tried and true. The knowing guest who goes to the feast in silent attention sits. With his ears he hears, with his eyes he watches, thus wary are wise men all. Happy the one who wins for himself favor and praises fair. Less safe by far is the wisdom found that is hid in another's heart. Happy the man who has, while he lives, wisdom and praise as well, for evil counsel a man full oft has from another's heart. A better burden may no man bear for wanderings wide than wisdom. It is better than wealth on unknown ways, and in grief a refuge it gives. A better burden may no man bear for wanderings wide than wisdom. For worse food for the journey he brings not afield than over drinking of ale. Less good there lies than most believe in ale for mortal men. For the more he drinks, the less does man of his mind the mastery hold. Over beer the bird of forgetfulness broods, and steals the minds of men. With the heron feathers fettered I lay, and Gunloth's house was held. Drunk I was dead drunk, when Fjall wise I was. 'Tis the best of drinking, if back one brings his wisdom home with him. The son of a king shall be silent and wise, and bold in battle as well. Bravely and gladly a man shall go, till the day of his death is come. A paltry man and poor of mind at all things ever mocks, for never he knows what he ought to know, that he is not free from faults. The witless man is awake at night, thinking of many things. Careworn he is when the morning comes, and his woe is just as it was. The foolish man for friends all those who laugh at him will hold, when among the wise he marks it not, though hatred of him they speak. The foolish man for friends all those who laugh at him will hold, but the truth when he comes, the counsel he learns, that few in his favor will speak. An ignorant man thinks that all he knows when he sits by himself in a corner, but never what answer to make he knows when others with questions come. A witless man when he meets with men had best in silence abide, for no one shall find that nothing he knows if his mouth is not open too much. But a man knows not if nothing he knows when his mouth has been open too much. Wise shall he seem who well can question, and also answer well. Naught is concealed that men may say among the sons of men. Often he speaks who is never still, with words that win no faith. The babbling tongue, if a bridle it find not, oft for itself sings ill. In mockery no one a man shall hold, although he fare to the feast. Wise seems one oft, if not he asked, and safely he sits dry-skinned. Wise a guest holds it to take his heels, when mock of another he makes. But little he knows who laughs at the feast, though he mocks in the midst of his foes. Friendly of mind are many men, till the feasting they mock at their friends. To mankind a bane mustn't it ever be, when guests together strive. Oft should one make an early meal, nor fasting comes to the feast, else he sits and chews as if he would choke, and is able to ask, and little is able to ask. Crooked and far is the road to a foe, though his house on the highway be. But wide and straight is the way to a friend, though far away he fare. For shall one go, nor stay as a guest in a single spot forever. Love becomes loathing if long one sits by the hearth in another's home. And now we're into our final reading, which is the Allegory of the Cave, which if you've never read it before, is Plato relaying the words of Socrates as he speaks. And this is a bit of a long one, but it's a fantastic thought experiment that you will definitely be exposed to at some point, so it's good you know the story. And now, I said, let me show in a figure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground den, which has a mouth open towards the light, and reaching all along the den. Here they have been from their childhood, and have their legs and necks chained so they cannot move, and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning around their heads. Above and behind them is a fire, is blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners there is a raised way, and you will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. I see. And do you see, I said, men passing along the wall, carrying all sorts of vessels and statues, in figures of animals made of wood and stone and various materials which appear over the wall. Some of them are talking, others silent. You have shown me a strange image, and they are strange prisoners. Like ourselves, I replied, and they see only their own shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. True, he said. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? And of the objects which are being carried in like manner, they would only see the shadows? Yes, he said. And if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Very true. And suppose further that the prison had an echo which came from the other side. Would they not be sure to fancy, when one of the passers-by spoke, that the voice which they heard came from the passing shadow? No question, he replied. To them, I said, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. That is certain. And now look again, and see what will naturally follow if the prisoners are released and disabused of their error. At first, when any of them is liberated and compelled to suddenly stand up and turn his neck round, and walk and look up towards the light, he will suffer sharp pains. The glare will distress him, and he will be unable to see the realities of which in his former state he had seen as shadows, and then conceive some one saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion, but that now, when he is approaching nearer to being, and his eye turned towards more real existence, he has a clearer vision. What will be his reply? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass, and requiring him to name them. Will he not be perplexed? Will he not fancy that the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are shown to him? Far truer. And if he is compelled to look straight at the light, will he not have a pain in his eyes which will make him turn away, to take refuge of the objects of vision which he can see, and which he will conceive to be in reality clearer than the things which are now being shown to him? True, he said. And suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent, and held fast until he is forced in the presence of the sun himself. Is he not likely to be pained and irritated? When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all of what are now called realities. Not all in a moment, he said. He will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. At first he will see the shadows best, next the reflections of men and other objects in the water, then the objects themselves. And then he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars and the spangled heaven, and he will see the sky and the stars by night better than the day, or the light of the sun by day. Certainly. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of him in the water, but he will be able to see him in his own proper place and not in another, and he will contemplate him as he is. Certainly. He will then proceed to argue that this is he who gives the season and the years, and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way the cause of all things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. Clearly, he said, he would first see the sun, then reason about him. And when he remembered his old habitation and the wisdom of the den and his fellow prisoners, do you not suppose that he would felicitate himself on the change and pity them? Certainly he would. And if they were in the habit of conferring honors among themselves on those who were quickest to observe the passing shadows, and to remark which of them went before, and which followed after, and which were together, and who were therefore able to draw the best conclusions as the future, do you think that he would care for such honors and glories, or the envy and the possessors of them? Would he not say with Homer, "Better to be the poor servant of a poor master, and to endure anything, rather than think as they do and live in their manner"? Yes, he said, I think that he would rather suffer anything than entertain these false notions and live in this miserable manner. Imagine once more, I said, such a one coming suddenly out of the sun to be replaced in his old situation. Would he not be certain to have his eyes full of darkness? To be sure. And if there were a contest, and he had to compete in measuring the shadows with other prisoners who had never moved out of the den, while his sight was still weak, and before his eyes had become steady, and the time which would be needed to acquire this new habit of sight might be very considerable, would he not be ridiculous? Men would say of him that up he went and down he came without his eyes, and that it was better to not even think of ascending, and if any one tried to loose another and lead him up to the light, let them only catch the offender, and they would put him to death. So that's the end of the allegory of the cave. And so if you want to read the rest of that, it's a fantastic book with many very famous examples, including the origin of the Atlantis myth. It's truly wonderful. I really hope you go and read all of it. But in all of the examples provided from different cultures and very different times and considerations of ignorance, and the refusal to question established or new beliefs causes problems. From the boat owner in the story from last week, who sends his potentially dangerous ship to sea, to ignorant rulers, to those who would not question their actions in support of slavery, and to those men in the bottom of the cave who killed their fellow for having more knowledge, or even in this case, different knowledge. Are the people who say that they would not go if the government demanded it better off for supporting the causes that they claim to disavow? What is the weight of your morals and ethics? I'm going to say, fear of the unknown, or that which threatens to upend your comforts, is legitimate, but is that fear worth the consequences of not considering your beliefs? I'm going to say, as we read last week, Clifford would say, absolutely not. I'm going to say, are the people of the cave better off for not listening to their fellow and in the end killing him? I'm going to say, do you would you rather, question all of your beliefs or claim to do so? So yes, I hope you consider all of those questions. So what do you do when your reality of something like this would be on the line? So then we'll next move into the ritual portion of our observance. We leave this offering for our gods to symbolize our connection and devotion. We gift this rock to symbolize the stability of the gods in our world. We gift this water to accept the flow of our lives. We welcome life and bless our offerings with oil to share our riches. We embrace our connection to each other and the world and celebrate our revival. Okay, we will now move into our closing words, which will appear... Stupid thing. I don't like that it does that. Anyway, which will appear on the slide behind you. You say, please, as with the opening words, listen as I read them aloud, or say them aloud at home with me. As we move out into the world, let us remember our community of faith. Cherish, love, and open your heart as you walk through life. Hold dear the light of the gods and our connection with the natural world. Go forth in celebration and carry the light of connection within your hearts. So, anyway, thank you all. And I really, really hope that you come and participate in our end of year survey, which is upcoming. And which will be all over our social media. So please, 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 if you can, participate in that.